Welcome everyone to the Adversity to Advantage podcast. I've done a couple of these today, but I'm still excited to see Matthew Zinman all the way from Philadelphia, all the way in his morning, excited to share with us his story. We're excited to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be with you, Petra.
It's great to have you. And I know a little bit about you. So I know that you run a business, you're an author, but also a bit about your story, which is the thing that I'm most interested in today. But first of all, give us a little bit of context just to what you do on a day-to-day basis. What excites you? What makes you want to wake up in the morning?
Well, quite a few things. Those are a lot of questions all at one time. So just to put into context, I'm in Philadelphia, as you said, and I've been here my whole life. And I went to Temple University and went into the field of marketing, communication, public relations, and did that working for agencies for a number of years and started my own company in 2002. And that was a real big life intersection point we can come back to in doing that, in part because I got divorced at the time. My personal life and my business life, combined right then and have been that way ever since. My son was 2 at the time. And then several years after that, I got into the field of internships, apprenticeships, and founded a nonprofit called the Internship Institute, which also covers apprenticeships, even though the name being what it is. And I'm still active with that. It's on the side burner right now, in part because of COVID, but more so because of the book I've written that just came out, and I'm doing that 100% of the time right now.
Yeah, you're a busy guy. And I love the title of your book. Give us a little sense of what the book's about, what it's called.
It's called Z-isms, Insights to Live By, and that's the 26th letter of the alphabet for those who prefer Z. Same by a different name. And it really is based on a number of things that I felt was important to write it. I've been wanting to write it for at least 10, 15 years. And I guess I have enough seasoning now. The time has come. But to answer your question, it really covers 4 categories in general. You've got personal discovery and mindsets and, everything internal to who we are and that. And then there's the external around personal relationships and some models for some unusual things that, are unique and presented in the book. And then further into mindfulness. So that escalates through things like swimming with the current, going with the flow, making coincidences matter, into amplifying gratitude and the law of attraction, and then beyond that into the things that are about finding your why and achieving them. And then the idea, the book comes out with this winning the battle within and developing a life enrichment action plan. It was really important to me to not just have it be a read, but something that people can come away with and have a course of action to pursue as they wish.
I love this so much. I love all of the headings. This is why I've got you on the show, because it's been part of my recent and historical journey to be thinking about mindset. Even before I had like the phrases of like, ooh, this is the mindset section, I'd be like, holy fuck, how do I think differently in order to survive?
Right.
Yeah, and then you sort of can map it into the model. And of course, there's evidence and science around gratitude, manifestation, and all these things, which are fascinating at the moment, that we actually have more control over the outcome in our life than we think. But also this weird like middle ground, the duality between putting the work in and letting go. Like that's the middle ground that I'm in. It's like learning to let go in business, relationships, but equally putting in the work in a different way than perhaps I was conditioned to as a through most of our lives in Western society. So we love the topic of resilience, developing our mindset on this show. We talk about catalyst moments that effectively can pivot us into a whole different way of thinking, a whole different world. But give us a sense of the young Matthew. So as a child, what was that like? Did you have role models for healthy mindsets? Was it a place where resilience was being strengthened and taught? Or was it like, what was that like? Give us a sense.
Thank you. It's interesting in trying to reflect on the question you're asking me in real time, but I'd say that I have some innate qualities, in the nature versus nurture, and in a lot of ways I point to playing ice hockey. It's something I've done since I'm 6 years old. I'm in my 50s now, and I'm still playing. So it's been a huge part of my life and defining me and my friendships and all of that. And at the foundation of the concept of the book, for example, is earned confidence. And it's basically the fact that we've been through everything that we've been through in our lives, and we're survivors, right? We're still standing. And so it's a reminder that no matter what happens, you can overcome everything you have, so you'll overcome everything that comes your way, as if we have a choice in that way anyway. But the main thing is to remind you to stay present and not worry and be anxious and stress or have regret and those sorts of things that take you out of the present, that are completely unnecessary and negative. So I was looking for some of the the root of that concept for me, and how it developed. And I looked to some of the early experiences, and one of which is that in the first summer I was playing hockey, I could barely stand on my blades, and we were on the ice with older kids, and I was just innocently standing where I was, and someone took a slap shot, and the puck curved and hit me in the jaw, broke my jaw in 3 places. And my poor mom, right? Yeah. And that was a defining moment.
Yeah.
Even at that young age, because it was very important to me to keep playing. It was I was living life through a straw for some time there, and then the fact that as a defining moment, I was able to get back into it, have the love of the game. Here in the States, the Philadelphia Flyers, of course, my team, they were the Stanley Cup champions at the time, right? So that was a big influence. When you ask me, well, yeah, I think the Flyers probably had the influence on my
big level. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, mom and dad, you're great. No, I think it was the Flyers, at that age.
But did you have messages from, I don't know, if you have siblings or coaches or parents, that was like, get on with it? Like, even if you can have a culture in a household that's like, we're a family who gets on. I often say this to my kids. I go, we're a family that shows up.
Right.
What about you?
Well, it's interesting. I think part of it's a cultural thing, right? So back at that time period, it was, my parents, I think most parents are pretty hands off here. It was like, go out and play, and if after dark, feel free to come home if you want.
Come home if you're hungry. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's inconceivable. Today, aside from what we're dealing with COVID, but yeah, I love my parents. I mean, they're great. I'm the youngest of 4. So I think there's another factor. I'm 5 years behind my next brother. Yeah. And so, been there, done that. And,
parents let go a little bit more. Each child, they let go a little bit more, and they just go, oh, they'll figure it out. They'll bounce back. And the
right. Well,
more involved.
At that age, and, back to that root of ice hockey, and around 9 or 10, I mean, I was going up to Canada for training every summer, put me on a plane, and, 8 weeks away from home, that was certainly defining parts of my life for sure.
That is, but all of these things that are defining, they build resilience. So the painful moments, the stressful moments, the exciting ones where you've got to grow up quickly and you fill in all the blanks, right? Those are the small moments that build resilience. But also, team sport has that ability to teach you. You fall, you get up. Your team backs you up. You back them up. Like, all the lessons from sport are really lessons for life, aren't they?
Absolutely. I saw somewhere, and I can't credit the source, but I believe it's true, in analyzing people who have achieved a certain level of success, that there is a commonality, that they've either played an organized sport, they served in the military, or they practiced a martial art.
Yeah.
So if you've done one of those things, you have an advantage.
I'm with you there. I wonder about being raised in a cult, if that's part of it, because you've got groupthink, and you got to manage the team, you got to be hyper vigilant, like all that stuff plays a part.
I can't speak to it, but I imagine there was a lot of structure, and I don't want to make light of it either. That's quite a thing.
Yeah, I mean, there was structure and design, and it takes some fight to begin to think for yourself when you get a little bit older. Right. So talk me through, let's jump straight into the deep end of some of those catalyst moments for you. You say defining moments, and I know that those moments with a nice title of defining and catalyst often feel pretty horrific and intense when you're in them. So I'd love to know, what were some of those moments for you?
So I'd say, and I'm just going to kind of skim through the years a little bit, and the things that have shaped me and did at the time, and certainly do true to this day. One is that I've had to contend with depression since my early teens, and I kept to myself, and I was a little bit of a loner kid too. And even again now, I have to manage that. That has a lot to do with taking care of myself and my daily living. Another thing, which was quite tragic as it gets, is that in my early 20s, um, something was wrong with my mom, and we weren't really sure what it was, and they kind of kept it to themselves. And finally, it was disclosed that she had a routine surgery and had tainted blood. She contracted HIV, and she was actually one of the first women on record in that at that very time, and she got the worst of it. I mean, in being a caretaker and those next 10, 12 years, and her deterioration, it doesn't get more difficult, and things that you stay with you through the years. So that certainly at that age was nothing could even come close.
And I imagine you're angry as well because of the way that it happened and the senselessness or the preventable way that it happened.
I've seen all, there's been all the emotions, and at this point it's so long ago. And she's gone almost 25 years at this point, and she had it for, she stayed with it and went through the worst of it for the 10 to 12. Yeah, I mean, of course there's a lot of anger at the time and what we experienced, and a lot of it had to do with, as she was lost more and more of her over time, really wanting to make the most of the good times that we could have, and an appreciation, going out of your way to really try and be present, to hold on to those things and try and hold on to the good memories when honestly there were a lot more bad ones. So that was certainly, I mean, what more can I say on that point in the moment? And look, I mean, wherever anybody is in life, they're, to whatever degree, they're going to experience all kinds of things they've had to overcome. And I'd say I'm a little bit above average on that front without too much of a comparison. Continuing to answer your question in terms of just highlights, as I mentioned, had a young son and was a single dad while starting a business, because I needed that flexibility and the freedom to be with my son half the time that he was with me. And, I'm in my apartment, my flat, and changing diapers, washing bottles, of a 2-year-old, single guy. I mean, that's pretty defining. And then I'd say, and I was a single dad for a number of years. I'm remarried now and have a stepdaughter who's 15. My son's now 19. And probably the other one would be in 2012, my brother David, who's closest to me, he had been through some falls and things, and he got hooked on opioids and took his life in 2012. So I don't know that I've ever quite gone through my life highlights in that way, right? In the
lowlights, in a way,
it's like,
in order to lead to the highlights.
Wow. I'm just piling them on here. But to answer your question, those are some of the things that certainly are very intense and defining.
Completely, and can really make or break. And I say make in a very sensitive, kind way, that they can either allow us to make them be defining moments, or they can impact us in a pretty horrific way. I'm curious about, through all of these challenges, so you're talking depression as a teenager, the situation with your mom, and then finally your brother, and I'm sure there were plenty of other little ones along the way. And of course, being a single dad, what was your mindset like at the time? So were you able and capable to talk to people about how you were feeling? Did you have a language around mental health and depression so that you could be open and get support? Or was it more of a keep it all in, kind of the toxic masculinity frame of just show no weakness? What was your coping mechanism?
I do have to smirk a little bit at the toxic masculinity comment, but that's okay. No, for real. I was the far side of being open and seeking support and friendship, and certainly counseling had, that was something that, and when my mom originally disclosed what was going on with her, their family meeting was called, to do so, and in the presence of a professional, and um, being very much into personal development, in particularly in my early to mid 20s, into my early 30s. For sure, I was consuming a lot of that, and it also gave me another foundation for just coping skills and things throughout my life that I've had to face, and reinforcing the grit factor,
again and
and
again and again.
again and again and again, right? It's just, it's the hockey analogy. You get knocked down, have to get back up at least one more time, and that's what you do. And in any one of these cases, there's no other way but through. And so if I point to the depression, for example, and I fast forward, and its relevance in real time, on a day-to-day basis. And I do have a chapter just educational, because I didn't want to dance around mood health. And there's actually a mood scale that's illustrated that really talks about, well, what would be perfect balanced mood, right? Whatever that is, and however long that can be sustained. But that normal range, however that is ever defined, either of normal, happy, normal, sad. But what happens when you start dipping and you have one down day and then a second down day? And so for me, I have to be hyper cautious not to let a third or fourth, because that's like starting to sink into quicksand, and the harder it is to get yourself out. And so I just don't give myself a choice. I create structure, I reach out, I listen to music, I work out, all those kinds of things that anyone might find for themselves to be their coping skills. And yet at the same time, you could also be dealing with, brain chemistry and imbalance, where you might need to reach out. I'm sure there are a lot of people right now who, in all the things that they have to be going through in adapting to somewhat of a new normal, right? Whatever that is for them, or abnormal, how are you coping with that? And certainly those kinds of things, and having to really parent yourself in a way, and just not give yourself a choice to do the things you have to.
I love all of that, just the self-awareness that you've obviously learned through the tough times of acknowledging, the bit that leads up to the maybe bigger bout of depression, and knowing what you need to do at what point. What do you think is the biggest misconception around depression? So with friendships or family or partners, who might be supporting somebody who's experiencing depression, what's the misconception, and how can the person on the outside perhaps understand and help?
So I'm trying to process and it's just a vernacular of the misperceptions and things like that. I think it comes down to that there's just no substitute for experience at all. And you can be a doctor, but if you've never experienced what it's actually like to go through those things, you have that disconnect. And the same thing goes for anyone who's really never experienced depression. I think for one, the whole issue of mental health is somewhat odd to me, because the brain is part of the body, right?
Exactly.
There's no separation here in that way, and yet we it's got that taboo, and it is something that I feel is so important to take head on. Um, the mis the, I think I'm just processing here, but I think everyone to a certain degree has experienced it at some level, right? We all get down, but if what you think your down is, but you're not really a person who's legitimately experiencing true depression, you're nowhere close to what it's like.
That's how many levels lower it can get.
Right, from the mild to the moderate to the neck deep in that quicksand and unable to move. And what do you do? And so I think, number one, that a lot of people, when they experience depression at first, the most difficult part of it is you don't realize it. It's almost like that experience of like spring is here, and like, like I feel like myself. And then you look back at like these last 3 months, I could, it's so sluggish and I couldn't move, right? That's like a low level depression that's really almost unrecognizable. But then when you sink deeper, it just becomes so much more distorted, like the opposite of rose-colored glasses, and seeing the world in bright colors. You know, everything seems so dismal, and you lose sight of the fact that even as bad as you feel, you have to realize that things won't always feel this way. Like, that's the life preserver, legitimately, that you have to keep in mind, even if you don't feel that way. To the question that you have in supporting, I mean, we all have people around us that we love, and to whatever degree you can tell someone is depressed, again, it can be hard. They can feel that inside and never disclose it.
Yeah.
So, and that's probably the case in suffering in silence more than not. One thing I will say that I think is somewhat of a benefit to what's happening now is the necessity of telehealth. And it's no longer as much of a barrier to say, oh, I've got to make, an appointment with some, witch doctor and go lie on a couch somewhere. You literally can have access to professional help much easier, with a phone call and a video conversation. So, as you understand from what the things are that we talked about, this is so deeply important to me. And the fact of what happened with my brother, and in that chapter, I literally write and have an image for the suicide hotline. And, for those who are suffering in silence and are really at the point maybe even of not being able to keep yourself safe, to, stick around, and reach out for help. And, and part of that could very well be, talk therapy or talking to friends only get you so far. If you're dealing with a true chemical imbalance where you need antidepressants or some combination of something, in my experience, believe that's at least 70% of what you need to get yourself all the way out. It takes time to get the right thing to work. It's such a hit or miss. So I know we're very deep on the topic, but it is something I think people are very susceptible to right now.
Yeah.
And hopefully those who are hearing this will reach out in whatever way. And those who suspect maybe people aren't quite themselves will do a little bit more checking in, because it's essential.
Absolutely. I love those real practical, actionable steps for self-awareness and managing yourself, taking personal responsibility, which sometimes we forget about when we're in the darker places, but equally reaching out. There's no shame in medication if that's something that's useful, but equally mindfulness. I know you touch on a lot of these topics in your book in order to kind of channel how you're thinking. I'd love to just, before we go further into some of those skills and where you're at now, the aftermath of your brother taking his life, and I know there were siblings left, and sort of there's always this ripple effect, isn't there? How have you made sense of it? Like, how do you get through finding out to having some kind of perspective, or do you ever get to a point where you can come to some kind of peace around something like that?
I honestly don't think there's any such thing as full closure on something like that. It's really, you're a little bit of a walking wounded. And how you manage that with anything else that you have, that you've experienced as wounds that you have to carry, that make you stronger, and turning things into as much of a positive and having good memories of those that you have. Same as with my mom. As he was going through that, and it was over, unknown to us to some degree over a period of time, he closed himself off. So there, even though we all live fairly close together, we weren't seeing a lot of each other. We weren't really talking on the phone, and we all have our own families. So it was kind of hard to know exactly what was going on. And we knew there was trouble. It's something that you ever, we were certainly concerned about it at the time. Actually, it wasn't a complete surprise, but he was so insulated and pushed people away that you just couldn't get to him. It's different than depression when you're dealing with addiction.
Oh yeah, I've had both, so I know of like the whole 9 yards. Yeah,
right.
On the inside, you end up pushing people away completely. There's so much shame connected to it, knowing that there's a feeling of being weak because you're in the cycle, right? And you think once you've had a bad sort of response that I'll never do this again. The amount of times that we say that to ourselves, I'll clean up my act. I had young kids when I was in the heart of my alcohol addiction, and was putting them in danger, and there was chaos just everywhere. And still, I could pretty much put on a face that was like stoic and look together,
Right.
so that people just wouldn't see the chaos that was going on underneath. And I almost didn't have the language for expressing it other than sort of anger or rage or chaos, which pushes people away in a different way. You know?
That's right. That's right. And that's actually an accurate description of some of what was going on for sure. And, glad we're in better places in that way.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So I love how you're being really realistic about this too. And there will be people that will never get to this perfect Zen place about some of the horrific things that have happened in their life. I want to touch on grief, and you've had it in sort of different shocking ways, but many people may be experiencing grief in some way. And we've had some people on who've been experts in this topic, actually. And they've talked about how it is different for everyone, and you do go through these phases, and there's different sort of tricks that allow you to manage it, which was good language that you use. It's about how do you manage moving forward, being present, and investing in the people around you. But for you, do you have any sort of tips or ideas on managing grief?
I'm thinking about that, and I'm trying to understand how that might be just from my experiences. Oh, I'm not going to say so different from me, but it's hard to process because, so for example, with both my parents are long gone, and my grandparents as well, and my brother, right? So, I've kind of been through quite a bit in that way, but especially with my mom, when you go through that experience of almost losing her, over and over again, that creates a different dynamic with what grief is and the experience of it, and you just kind of brace yourself for it and almost expect it, and then it gets to the point where you're just, wow, she's at peace. Or same thing with my brother. It's difficult to make sense of it, but he was in a lot of pain, and in his own way, and I don't know that he really could see a way out, and now he's at peace. Those are some of the things that, what choice do we have? There's it's like anything, whether it's grief or any other difficulties, there's no other way but through.
Well, you say that, and that's true. There's no other way than through, as far as time passing, and if you either take your own life or you continue to show up at life. But I have seen people do it, and there's sort of this fork in the road, right? So you can go through, but you can numb your own pain. You can start using alcohol. You can start avoiding. You can start playing really safe, never taking risks, never doing another relationship for fear of losing the person, the risk there. And for other people like yourself and myself and other people we've had on the show, they've chosen this other fork where you're going to go through and you're going to thrive. You're going to impact other people. You're going to bring meaning to the challenges that you've had in order to support other people through things. So I feel there's this distinctive through it shows up in different ways for different people. I know that you're thriving and doing that bit. So how do you go there?
Well, I have a greater clarity about your question. And, when you talk about coping with things, the first thing that doesn't come to mind is don't do this or don't do that in terms of self-destruction. So I guess the first point is, don't self-destruct. Number one, that would be the last thing that they would want. You have to honor them. If you're talking about death, you have to turn it to, the best of it in relation to yourself. And so when it comes to not being self-destructive, that if you're going to honor them in the way that you'd want to, not to, they wouldn't want that for you. Right. So there are different things that you say to yourself and things you need to do. It's really tough, how people handle this. I mean, for me, in terms of the positive, the physical exercise, the ice hockey, the gym routine, the structure, whether that's for depression, the staying connected, the positive experiences, the managing of energy, not only within myself, but with the people around me of, this person's a real drain on me right now. I really just don't have that gear, I've got to take care of myself. And if I give too much of that away, it's going to be detrimental. So knowing that about yourself, but, and being honest with the person, who might be leaning on you and say, you know what, I just don't have it. But also seeking the positive people who lift you up. you have to be proactive about that.
Yeah, I love that. So absolutely, it's taking personal responsibility to put the things in place that can work for us to lift our mood, our mindset, and allow us a different perspective and a chance of actually showing up at life in a different way. I want to ask you one final question, but before I do, where can people find you? We've got the book. What's your website? Where can people find you if they're interested in finding out more?
Thank you, Petra. Zisms, Insights to Live By,
Love it.
Or the Z, still the same letter, has a website, which is ZZ. It has a hyphen, isms, isms.com. Some free resources there. You can read the first part of the book. I mean, the only thing I ask of anyone who's the least bit interested is go read for free, the first part of the book. The introduction will tell you all about it. You'll know if you want to keep reading. It's like a personal conversation. And as I think hopefully you've gotten a sense, I want to help as much as possible. So there's a lot of practicality and action steps in there. And the thing that you talked about with the law of attraction and the things that are effortful, I'd love to talk with you more about, because we definitely go deep there around finding your why and life achievement, and so forth. So there's that, and then whatever version of Amazon, you'll certainly be able to find it there, and the reviews have all been gratefully very good. So.
Well, and that's a great component to this, which is when you have some kind of why, as you call it, a purpose, a manifestation, or even a simple vision for your future. What do you want? How can you map it out? It makes the smaller investments that we need to do every day, such as meditation, exercise, the stuff that lifts our mood enough. It gives it a purpose rather than, oh God, I got to meditate again. I got to work out again. Like every day is a new sort of Groundhog Day thing. But when we have that higher purpose of whatever it might be for you, but you've done the self-development to clarify it, it makes all that little stuff worthwhile in my perspective. So that's like the missing component maybe that we didn't talk about yet.
Yeah, can we spend another minute on it?
Please, go for it.
Okay, so I really think that when we go into the areas of personal development and the law of attraction, and I think, I summarized, it's more also an educational chapter in a way. Well, what is it? And it boils down to, in my view, what we expect tends to happen, right? So when you connect that back to worrying, for example, if you believe in the law of attraction and you're a worrier, then you're contradicting yourself, because worrying could actually cause that, right? You're worrying about things you don't want to happen. And then when you go over into beyond that, the law of attraction can be very transactional. There's only so much you can do. Things like books don't write themselves. Big goals and your why, those things are effortful. So how do you combine that vision and work backwards from it in such a way to make that achievement inevitable? That's where we go in after the amplifying gratitude, law of attraction area, to bring it about in as straight a line as possible, right? Because of all the things that life can throw our way. So, and I guess the last thing I'll say is, when you look at because everything's like a Groundhog Day right now, I think, for a lot of people.
That's true.
And one of the things I think is important to look at is, how do we turn the challenges, difficulties that we face now, whatever those may be in our lifestyle changes or work loss or anything, somehow to our advantage, whether that's another door opening or an enriching time with our family. Or if you fast forward, 2 years down and you want to reflect on what this time period was, what would you want that to be? And personal development is another area that we have an opportunity to turn our attention to and do.
I love that. There's great opportunity right now to reflect, map out, read the book, do the exercises, think about that big vision and the big picture. And I love the manifestation thing. I do get the book, guys, because really getting it explained and understanding the practice is crucial. Because some people go immediately to it's this fluffy woo-woo thing, but there's so much science now behind intention and neuroscience and brain scans and all this stuff around when we do that. Like, there's an effective methodology that occurs in our consciousness. And I mean, it's a total rabbit hole, but fascinating, and allows us to think about what's actually possible for us, no matter what is in our past. And those of us who have had things in our past, catalyst moments, what I consistently see is the resilience and the ability to observe a crisis such as COVID and sort of observe it from a distance and go, hey, like I've been through stuff before and I've gotten through it. I'm going to get, have that certain inner confidence around it. I mean, do you find the same thing? Just that resilience piece?
Absolutely. I think I think everything points to positive and negative energy, and pointing yourself, in the right direction, and what you need to do to stay on the best side of that ledger to enrich your life and avoid the suffering part.
Well, exactly. You can have the bad stuff, but we get to avoid the suffering if we shift our perspective. I love this so much. So my final question is just like a side point that's just coming to me. So I've got a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old. I think you said you have a 19-year-old and a 15-year-old,
right.
Boy and girl. I've got a boy and girl as well. And I'm curious about, from a parenting perspective, you know how we want to protect our kids and we want to be like, oh, I don't want them to go through the same stuff I did. I want to protect them. But equally, I know that challenge builds grit and allows you to eventually sort of lead your best life. So what do you like as a parent when it comes to protective versus no, go face the challenge kind of parenting because of your own experience, I guess?
Let me step that up one point to the practical side of parenting, because I'm certainly not the perfect parent like any others out there. But what I've learned, and my son just going off to college, and actually one of the parts in the prevention is, and he, with his permission, publishing the letter that I wrote him when I dropped him off at his dorm. And certainly I covered a lot of ground. At this point, how much influence do I have over him, and yet what is the one point you want to drill, and on that point it's just make good decisions. Like, you hope that you've calibrated their compass well enough through their life that they know what that is, and that's the mantra right in that moment. I got to make a good decision here. Like, like he should be cursing me out right at that point, and I hope he does, just to make him make a good decision. But the other thing, where what you just described, that I think is hopefully the best parenting advice, is to say, go figure it out a lot more. Go figure it out. Because our job is to make our kids self-sustaining. And I think we have a tendency to be overprotective. And, I think as a single dad, that certainly had a part of the dynamic in trying to do so much for him and things. And I regret it. I think he's getting more self-sufficient. I don't want to cut him down in an interview, but I think that that's really the key. And I could point to my stepdaughter and how, my wife Erica raised her, and wow, I mean, I could send her across the world and with a quarter in her pocket and not even worry about her. Say, go figure, if there's something to be done with your child, and you think it through, and it's something they can go figure out themselves, your answer needs to be, go figure it out.
And that means sitting with the discomfort of whatever concern or worry, or letting go in a way, and trusting that they've got to build their own character in their own way and develop themselves.
They have to learn by doing it themselves. There's no other way to learn some of that than without doing it. So you have to make them, whether they like it or not.
Matthew, thank you so much. Your book sounds outstanding. Well done on the achievement in the first instance, and for all the insights that they're obviously just rich from your own experience. We really appreciate your insight and having you on the show. We'll put everything into the show notes. Thank you.
Thanks to everybody listening, and thanks so much for having me, Petra. I really appreciate it.